Hello, welcome to Word on the Street with Gary Clinton. I'm Gary Clinton, and I'll be your host. For this debut installment, I am calling it Charlie Kirk Sparks a New Awakening. And I believe it is a new awakening for different reasons. And I believe it is multifaceted. But for this purpose today, I want to focus on three facets of the awakening. Two of them somewhat major, and the third more personal. And I think the first awakening is a religious awakening in our society. I believe if we look back many years ago, we were in a time where expressing our religious views, expressing our moral convictions was pretty much acceptable. It wasn't anything out of the normal. And as time progressed, I think it became a time where we feel uncomfortable and even at times unsafe expressing our views. They were no longer mainstream. So if we go back to the time when we seemed to be free to express our opinions with anyone around us, it was a time when our country, of course, had been founded primarily as a Judeo-Christian believing society, and most Judeo-Christian norms or morals were pretty much the standard in our society. And we felt comfortable talking to one another about these things. And as time progressed, the world got a lot more busy. People were a lot more opinionated about things. And I think in general as a society, we tend to have turned away from God and turned away from Christ. Where at one time Christ was the center of our lives, center of our existence in society. And that had a huge reflection on where we were politically. But as time has progressed, we've gotten further away from that. I think for the most part, our society in general still has a belief in deity, and the largest part of those with a belief in deity believe that Christ should be the center of our lives. And while many will still profess that Christ is the center of their lives and that he is the reason, that kind of takes a back seat to other things in our lives. There was a time when I was younger, I know we could spend time with one another regardless of what our religious or political views were. We tend to have a common belief in Christ, in God, and it was a major part of our lives. Sundays were a time where families got together and went to church. And even if they didn't go to the church, they would spend times together as a family, as a community, doing the things that they enjoy and help them to grow closer to one another as a community. But as things grew and got busier all around us, our focus as a society turned to other things. It turned to going out and either working or doing the things that better your life as an individual, instead of focusing on the community and focusing on your life with a center around Christ. I think a lot of that started with the fact that we believed as a society that the Sabbath was a holy day. And for the most part, the largest part of society considered Sunday to be the Sabbath. So Sunday was a sacred day in a lot of ways. Even if people didn't go to church, they tended to believe that it was still a sacred day and a day to be spent with family. So it was not uncommon for people to get together and enjoy one another's company. It was not uncommon for families to go to church on a regular basis. In fact, going to church on Sundays was a community activity that everybody tended to be expected to participate in to some degree. and usually the largest degree, meaning they were in church most Sundays, spending time with fellow parishioners, whatever religion it was. It tended to be very common in our society. However, again, as times progress and we get very busy in life and start seeing things in another light, Sunday no longer became as important to a lot of people. And honoring the Sabbath was a commandment that wasn't all that important. I think for the most part because we began as a society justifying spending the Sabbath doing other things. Progression, I think it's a lot of people would refer to as the progressive path, meant that we must always be growing and increasing our wealth, increasing the things that we have. And that meant that Sunday was just another day to continue progress or continue earning. I can still remember the times when a lot of states, particularly Texas, had what we called blue laws. So a lot of the products that you would typically buy were restricted on the Sabbath. So if you needed something in an emergency as far as medication or food for the children or different things, those were considered exceptions on the Sabbath. But most other products were restricted on the Sabbath, which led to a lot of businesses being closed. So people spent more time at home. They spent more time with family, spent more time with their communities. But as we got away from that, I believe that became a reflection as well that society in general growing further away from Christ, further away from God. And this has become a big problem in our society, in my opinion. I believe that as we have grown further away from God, we have made him less important in our lives. We have made our church community and the camaraderie in general within our community less important. And I think that a lot of people, for the most part, still have their beliefs. They still believe in God. Christians still believe in Christ, and they still confess that that's a major part of their lives. But for the most part, it's kind of on the back burner. It's not made on the whole to be important. While it may be important in our hearts, it's kind of taken a back seat in a lot of our minds. And I think that's something that Charlie Kirk had noticed. He noticed that Christ was not the center of many lives. And I believe he probably recognized that this was a big part of the problems that we face in modern day society. And that's why I consider this to be a major awakening that was sparked by Charlie Kirk. Of course, it wasn't him alone. There are other things in life that happen that help us to recognize miracles and know that there's something missing, and that draws us nearer to Christ. And I think Charlie Kirk recognized that and knew that it was a huge problem in our society and decided that he wanted to do something about it. And while there may be some beliefs that we don't share, that general belief that we need to get back to God as a society is something that I believe we have in common. And I admire him for that. You know, he lived a short life, but in that time, he made great progress in helping others come to that acknowledgement. And I think that's something that we should respect him for. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of disrespect and a lot of anger and hate-filled comments, generally coming from those that I believe probably don't understand the significance of the difference that Charlie had made in a lot of lives. I think for the most part, our younger generation has grown further and further away from God. And that's the young people are the future of this nation. And with them growing further away from God, that puts the potential of this nation further behind. It puts us in a place that is ungodly. And I highly respect the fact that he is willing to step out and do those things, and to go to places where it would be unpopular, and be brave in telling people what he thought about where we needed to be as far as having Christ and God in our lives. Because when we put it on the back burner and we don't make it a major focus in our life, then the only result is that we're going to fall away, that we're going to become a lesser people. So in that first respect, what I believe is the awakening that he helped spark is very major, and it is something that we would all be blessed, better blessed, if we could adopt a more Christ-like attribute in our lives and do what we can, not only to grow closer to God ourselves, but to put ourselves in a position where we can share with others and help improve the lives of others. Because after all, we are all children of God. We're created in the image of God. And as a community, as a family, we need to bond together. We need to work together to find commonality in our beliefs and find those things that help us to grow stronger as a society. And growing stronger as a society, and we grow stronger as a nation. I remember being younger, and being religious was a major part of our life. We were in church, as far as I can remember, every Sunday. It was something that it was important in our lives, and I think that is one of the most singular things that brought us together and helped us to stay together as a family and to work hard to love one another and to be good examples for those around us. Later in life, as we, like everyone else, started getting busy with life and stopped making religion as important in our lives, then in certain aspects of our lives we grew apart. And fortunately, not completely apart. But I believe being strong and being diligent in maintaining a Christ-like life and making an effort to set that example holds families together. And families are important. That was the whole purpose for God sending us to this earth, is to create families and to live in families and to do those things that not only benefit our families growing together and closer to God, but benefit us as a community in being able to have compassion and being able to help those around us. So I believe Charlie Kirk's life made significant difference in the lives of a lot of others. And as tragic as his death has been, I think this will continue to roll forward and impact even more lives. And I'm very much respect what I saw of Charlie Kirk, though I didn't know him personally. I've never met him. I've seen a lot of his videos, a lot of his interviews, and I find so much in common. And I appreciate the sacrifices he made in order to bring some of that enlightenment to the rest of society, and particularly to the younger generations who had very much lost sight of godly things in life, in pursuit of riches, in pursuit of the entertainment and joy that they thought would fill the empty spaces in their life. I think many of them have come to realize, and are still coming to realize, that a relationship with God and with Christ will fill those places that they thought they were voids. And I'm very hopeful that maybe something I say can help, and that maybe we can all come to a stronger understanding of our purpose in life and why God has brought us here. So that is the first facet as far as the awakening sparked by Charlie Kirk. I think another aspect would be in our political involvement. I think my my introduction to politics at a young age goes far back as the Jimmy Carter administration. I think before then, politics were not something I really heard much of. So I can't speak so much for anything further back than that without uh, doing a deep dive and studying more about the intricacies of politics beyond that. However, what limited exposure I had to politics then, I kind of understood that it was something that was talked about by people when it affected their lives directly. A lot of times it was talked about in general. But it seemed that people could sit down and talk about politics even when they had differing views and still maintain some civility. And as different administrations came about, uh, those trends tended to change. And it got us to the point where we are now, where there's a massive amount of division. And because there is such a massive amount of division, a lot of the younger individuals in our society shied away from politics, if not completely abstained from it. And again, we know that the youth are our future. And if they weren't getting involved in politics, then they were going to be unprepared to have anything to do with politics. And they're simply going to vote and talk about politics as far as it pertained to their personal feelings. And we know that when we involve a lot of personal feelings in politics, that they can go awry. And I think there was a time when we tended to still bond together as a society and not allow politics to be so effective in our lives. And particularly the youth were affected by this. And we got to a point where I believe people are listening to the talking points. They're listening to those who have been basically ordained to tell us what to believe. And for a large part, the younger generations are susceptible to that. And it has become a problem because as even some of the midlife generations we have now have listened to some of those talking heads in the past, and they've allowed that to form their beliefs politically. They've allowed that to influence them into what they felt very strongly about. And it's not always that because something's a bad idea, somebody wants to hurt us. A lot of times it's because they have been conditioned by listening to others, and this is where they form their beliefs. Fortunately, I had the opportunity to grow up where some of the things going on in society that did affect our lives and our family growing up, we were able to look at it and understand and feel what it was doing to us and see the firsthand effects of what these policies and other things had in our lives. And this is where Charlie Kirk comes in as well. And he spoke to the younger crowds. And of course, anyone familiar with Charlie Kirk knows that he did a lot of shows on college campuses where he would have open discussions with people who disagreed with him and try to share and enlighten them with a better understanding of the policies that they were talking about or the issues that they were talking about. Because many times issues that people feel very strongly on are ill-informed. And I think Charlie did a wonderful job in studying and educating himself to understand the impacts that these particular policies and beliefs have on society. I think he recognized the fact that our youth not understanding the true aspect of policies and the true meaning of certain policies within the political realm uh, helped to enlighten the younger youth, the crowds, because when you really dig deep and find the answers for yourself, it helps you not only to see the truth of the effect of policies, but it helps you to understand what kind of effect it has on your life. And being willing to speak to the younger crowds and being able to debate them when they believe so strongly against your point of view, it was a very admirable thing. So from a political standpoint, it is another new awakening. It's something that was very needed in our society. As I'd mentioned before, our society has gotten away from some of the more basic beliefs and strengths that made us a strong community. And unfortunately, when we see different trends or different patterns in politics, it affects us as a society. It doesn't have to, but it does. When we grow apart politically, we grow apart as a society. We begin blaming others for things not being right in our lives. And I think that, just as Charlie has mentioned before, that's something that we need to take serious in our lives. We need to inform ourselves, and we need to understand how it affects our lives as individuals and as a society. And so many of the history that we are being fed in our society anymore, unfortunately, is jaded one way or the other. I know it's an old cliche that to the victors go the rewards or the spoils, and I think go the spoils is probably a more significant description, because when you are victorious in battles, then you tend to be the ones who write the history. And when that history is jaded, or the facts of history are presented in a way that suits one's particular narrative, and that tends to be what's being spread in the schools and in museums, then that's the side you're getting. And I think it's important that we all understand that there are always two sides to the story, that there are many great people on both sides of the aisle. There are many people on both sides of the aisle who are selfish and tend to push things towards their narrative as well. So it's important that we study and understand both sides of the coin. And I know that's something that I've heard Charlie talk about many times, about how you need to have a real understanding rather than simply listening to one side or the other. Because when you take a deeper dive into it and you look at the reasons behind certain feelings on one position or the other, you gain a better understanding of what's really at stake. And if we can, many times, find some place in the middle and learn to compromise, we can all be happy, and we can all flourish and have better lives. But I think there are certain extreme beliefs that are taken by one side or the other that cause you to feel passionate about one side or the other. And in doing so, we kind of get a tunnel vision where we don't understand, or at least don't even try to understand, the other point of view. And it would benefit us to push away that temptation to be one-sided about something, and to be able to look at both sides and discuss where you need to be in that issue. And something that has not been very popular is the fact that when we study these issues, we need to go to God and find out what He wants us to do. I mean, some things are pretty common sense, and we know what's wrong, we know what's right. But then there are some issues that may be a little muddied, and that's where we need to be deep in prayer and speak to our Father in heaven and ask Him to help us to understand where He would prefer we be on these issues. I think if we were to do that, and we were all to work together and look for our answers from a common source, then we would be able to come together as a society, as a community, and in our politics. Our politics, unfortunately, form a lot of where we are in society. And because the waters get very muddied in politics, it causes us as a society to not want to work with others around us. And then as time has passed, we can all see where society and the difference in society tend to mimic that in politics, and we become divided among many different aspects in life. I mean, we can say that there's racial division, there's political division, there's just general division in society. And we allow that to happen because we make our political beliefs or our own narrative so important that we refuse to listen to someone on the other side. And we refuse to make the effort to come together and compromise in things. And we, even on issues that we may consider moral issues, because we feel so strong about something, we lose our moral compass. And it causes us to feel more strongly than we should about some issues. And sometimes we end up on the wrong side. And I think that's something that Charlie Kirk fought against. I think he encouraged a lot of people to look at both sides, to do your own research. And unfortunately, in this day and age when we have so much media and we have so many varying opinions about different things, we tend to listen to those opinions that kind of make us feel good, and sometimes the things that kind of make us angry because we feel like we've been slighted, or we know people personally that we feel like they've been slighted, that they're unfair, and they ended up on the wrong side of the scales. But I think we have to learn to understand that sometimes bad things happen to good people. And sometimes when bad things happen to us, we have to work a little harder to overcome and to be a better person, and to allow ourselves to be compassionate, in the sense that because we've been wrong doesn't give us the right to wrong or avenge that wrong. Which, hearing Charlie's widow forgive the person that had done them wrong is very inspiring, because we do live in a time when we feel like we've been wronged and we want to right that wrong. We want to feel like that we've been justified, and that leads us to feel so strongly about things that we'll be blind to what true justice is. So I think the awakening that Charlie has sparked in this society, and not only in this nation, but other nations around us, is a good thing. It is a tragic event, but it has had some good results. And I wish we all could look into it more deeply and understand how this event has created an awakening, and how we can be a major part in this awakening. We can fashion our lives after those things that God would have us do. and love one another and help our brothers and sisters, not only in our own societies in this nation, but worldwide. At the same time, looking at these matters not only with common sense, but with direction from God, and try to understand the differences that cause us to be so far apart. So I mentioned that there are three aspects of this awakening that I wanted to talk about. And of course, religious being one and political being the other, that I consider to be pretty important parts of this awakening. The third, I said, was more personal, and it's because it is more personal to me in particular. I think the awakening that I have found in this comes from the fact that I guess I've been somewhat complacent. I grew up, we were a religious family, and I'd mentioned that before. And it became a major part of our lives. And it became something where we felt obligated to be an example to those around us, obligated to have compassion for those who had less than we did, and to always be willing to serve in order to show love to people. And so that is something I grew up with. It is something that was a major part of our family. Our parents, I have 7 brothers and sisters. Our parents made sure that we grew up learning to serve other people. It was an important part of life, because no matter how tough you have it, there's always somebody else who's suffering a little more. And there's always help that we can offer. Even if it's not a hand up, we can offer encouragement and offer something straight from our heart and offer an opportunity to see Christ in a new light. So it for me, it's an obligation as children of God, something we should simply do. Having said that, I think I've become complacent in a lot of ways where it has not been the key focus in my life. I know that we need to have Christ as the center of our life, and I haven't been there. And Charlie's incident, and the way Charlie lived his life, and the help that he offered, helped me to take a deeper look at where I'm at. And as I've said, we grew up very religious, very much trying to serve others around us, trying to serve the community and do our part to be good citizens of our community. At 20 years old, I served a 2-year mission, a full-time mission, where I spread the word of God, and I helped others who were interested come to a better understanding of Christ and the sacrifice he made for us, and did what I could to help them come into Christ. And that was a very, very important 2 years of my life. I grew in ways that are unimaginable. I grew in ways that helped me to become a better citizen and to better understand those around me, even when they had different views than I had. And it helped me to have even more of a desire to serve. And being a full-time servant at that time, every day was filled with studying the gospel, with studying the scriptures and making it a part of my life, and preparing myself to be able to share with others. And when I finished the 2-year mission, I continue to do some of those things and make it a part of my life. But as I get busy in life and as I move around in other things and jobs and trying to get ready to start and raise a family, without realizing it, I let it take a back seat in my existence. It no longer was the center of my life. And seeing the efforts that Charlie made and understanding at such a young age what an impact he had has caused a new awakening in me. I see now where I have been complacent, not only in actively engaging in sharing the gospel, actively engaging in helping others come into Christ. It has caused me to step back from even being a full example of who Christ would want me to be. And I think when we are an example, we do the things that we need to be doing, that others will question us, and they will ask about the things that make us happy, and why we carry ourselves the way we do. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of us become shy, a lot of us are very timid, and we find it hard to talk to people about religion, about politics, about other things that truly affect our communities. And so we think that by example alone, that people will find that light. And many times they will. But I think it is our mission here on earth, part of our mission on earth, is to share the gospel with others, to be able to share the light of Christ with others. Because in our society in general, it hasn't been an important thing. There are a lot of people who don't get a lot of religion at all in their life. It's never been an important thing. It's never been something that they valued because they've never been exposed to it. So it becomes our duty to not only be the example, but to be willing to step forward, to be willing to testify, not only of our belief and our understanding, but the joy that it brings to us, and be willing to share that joy with others. So this is something that I vow to reinvigorate myself in sharing the gospel, and to being that example that helps others find the light of Christ. And I know I speak a lot about the light of Christ, but there are others who may not believe in Christ, who are still very religious and still have a very strong belief in deity. And I believe it would help them as well to reach out to that belief in deity and to understand their spirituality, and let that be an enlightenment to them. Let that be an encouragement to them to share the gospel as well, and to be able to share our moral values. Some of our moral values are not popular, and we may get mocked, we may be laughed at, we may be scorned because we live our values, and that we want to share those values with others. And unfortunately, that's something that we are simply facing this day and time. And it sometimes takes a great deal of bravery to stand up and to be that light, and to be that person who will say or do something that makes a difference in the life of one of our brothers or sisters in God. And I think that it's admirable that there are those who are willing to give their life for that belief, and for the opportunity to share that belief with others. And while that is a highly honorable thing to do, to be willing to give your life for that belief, I think many of us in our mind and through our lips, we say that we would be willing to give our life. And when it comes right down to it, if tested, we would be willing to give our lives for these beliefs. But I think something even more important that our God would have us do is to live our lives for Him. And we think of how tragic and how brave giving our lives would be for our beliefs and in defense of our religion. It is so much more important to live our lives for those same things. And part of living our lives for those things entails setting the example and not being ashamed of who you are, not being ashamed of the values that you have and that you're willing to share. It becomes the responsibility for all of us to be forward in what we do. Be willing to share our testimony, not only in word, but in all that we do, in the way we live our lives. And hopefully we can band together in doing this and bring our society as a whole more to the center, where we can understand one another, where we can look at our differences, and we can be compassionate and be strong in our beliefs and sharing them and debating them, but still be able to get along, still be able to find common ground and love one another. This is something I truly believe. This is something, again, where I have been more awakened, because I've always had that desire to share and to be a part and be the good in someone's life. But I think I've kind of let it slip to the back burner and not made it so important in my life. And it's something I need to do. It's something I need to pass on to my children and help them understand and know that God is the most important thing in our lives and should always be. And that we should live our lives in that way. And that we should be willing to share and bring others along for the journey. This is something that I am grateful for, the example that Charlie Kirk has set for all of us. Though we may not believe or agree 100% in everything he had to say, or every point of view, that it is an admirable thing that he has done. He has touched many hearts, has certainly touched me, and awakened in me a desire to be more diligent, to be more Christ-like, and to live my life as Christ would. I thank you for listening. This is the first installment of this, which I hope to be a show going forward, and I will try to fashion the content for my show based on comments and questions left in this app, and I will do my best to read all of the comments and questions, and from a core topic, be able to do a little more deep diving and address that topic in videos to come. I hope to make this something that might inspire others and also encourage me to try harder and to work harder on being prepared to answer questions that are asked intelligently, and also, of course, answer things from the heart. But in order to answer from the heart intelligently, you also need to study these things, and I will do that. I'll take the questions and comments from you, the viewer, in order to come up with topics. And I'm sure some of these will be controversial. A lot of people don't like to listen to things that have a lot of religion mixed into it, or scriptures mixed into it. But I think a belief in God and a belief in the scriptures as a guide in our lives will help us in life in general. And I think many of the topics and conversations that we have will be much better suited putting Christ in our life and going to the ultimate handbook of life, which is the scriptures, and understanding what we need to do. So there'll be times that I will bring scriptures or gospel topics or make comments that have to do with religion, and compare them to the things that we're talking about, the things we're seeing in life. I hope you'll join me again. And if you like what you've heard, you want to hear more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. You can turn on the notifications, and I'm not sure how frequent I'll be doing these shows, but I will try to get something on here as often as possible. And I appreciate you coming and listening. And I'll see you next time. Word out.